And good afternoon, and welcome to OK Boomer Live. I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit. And I hope you all have had a great Independence Day. I almost said Memorial Day. Um, we had a great time, went to the beach, got a little bit burnt, but fortunately, with the Mediterranean ancestry, um, didn't get too badly cooked. Um, and I hope you guys enjoyed your time together as a family. I thought today's show was remarkable. It doesn't take much to get me. I'm pretty camera ready and ready for action. But when I saw the number of attendees today on the show, it was really interesting. Let me just get this other monitor going here. Pardon me. And I thought it was great because the amount of people that had signed up were really terrific. We have well over 50 folks that signed up, and I just want to make sure I get my monitor so that I have any questions. Okay, yeah, it was just like fantastic to see, you know, um, large scale retailers, even a few people from Amazon hop on today. So um, the whole genesis of today's show started out with the fact of whether or not um, Amazon could potentially introduce a vessel string in the Transpacific. And it's an area that I've always been fascinated in as a data guy, watching their growth. And one thing I wanted to talk about today that is actually a last minute addition to the program is I'm actually going to break some news today. Um, about a year ago, I think it was. Ryan Peterson from Flexport had originally looked at Amazon's NVO license 4 or 5 years back, 3 or 4 years back. And I did some further detailed work on what that meant, and fortunately did a story with the USA Today from a talented business reporter, Beth Weiss, on Amazon and how they might use their NVO license. And it's really fascinating because, all of a sudden in 2017, 18, 19, and of course year to date, we've seen a huge amount of the um, uh, SCAC code, Amazon Logistics, the uniform carrier codes, AMZ N for Amazon Logistics. And that's all the fulfillment by Amazon cargo, coming in from predominantly the major Chinese ports. And just up until maybe 2 or 3 hours ago, this just goes to show you how tightly contained Amazon has their wraps around the data. Um, I have just discovered that because, well, in part due to the space allocation issues and the up and down nature of space and rates in the Trans-Pacific eastbound, that it appears that Amazon Logistics as an entity couldn't get all their cargo booked. If that's even in the wildest remotely possibility, it appears that it is because what's happened is Hackney Corporation. Hackney is now, a very famous Chinese NVO. I have now seen a new SCAT code, FSIH, where Hackney is serving now to bring in the overflow of the Amazon fulfillment cargo. And it's not just a little. It's about 25% of the normal Amazon logistics volume. And this has been going on for a little bit of time now, that it fell under my radar until I started scoping out the data for this issue. So the initial reports today is that Amazon Logistics and their fulfillment by Amazon, where they go after small Chinese shippers and bring them in cradle to grave, that is now being supplemented by Amazon's work with Hackney. And rather than Beijing Joyo, which is Amazon's subsidiary company, I think the actual name is Beijing Zhuoyo Courier Services. There is a new entity called Hong Kong Milley, Milley Limited. And I don't know their connection, whether that's wholly owned subsidiary by Amazon or it's just a super vendor, like an Alibaba type, that's feeding FBA cargo as an agent into the Amazon system via the HECNI program. So this is a huge breakthrough, huge development, because these numbers moving on HECNI for the Amazon FBA program are huge. And fortunately, my numbers today, when I talk about my program, have taken into consideration some growth in the Amazon logistics program, excuse me. And so I think that we're good in terms of stating, some facts about how a fully profiled vessel might look for Amazon. But before we begin on talking about whether or not it's feasible for Amazon to have its own vessel string, my background, of course, is CEO of Ocean Audit, and I wanted to put together this program. Since we don't have a lot of time, obviously, what you'll see on the screen, we could talk operationally, economically, and politically, and really debate every single number and scenario that I have on the screen. So consider this just my snapshot approach. This is kind of how I think about an idea before I put it into practice. I look at it and I shape it and I determine whether it has some merits or some legs to it. So when we go through the program today, keep that in mind, that this is by no means done scientifically or by economists. Sorry, Flexport. I had to get that in. I'm sorry, Phil. Yeah, and Sane, love you guys. So I think that my approach to it is just real holistic to give the market a fair shake on what's happening. And how the origins got started of the Amazon program with Duell, which John Monroe is always kind to share and point out to me on his expertise. And I think that overall, when you look at the Amazon potential, it's really incredible. I mean, I studied what I put together, and I love my work that I did, because I think it's really starting to show the world how Amazon could easily do this. Again, people may disagree, but this is my opinion on how Amazon might get involved in managing their own fleet, and the cost analysis benefit of how I see it hypothetically. So let's get into the slides. I'll see if I can put this together a little tighter here. There, that should be good. And we'll move to the slides itself. So the title of today's show, for those of you that just are joining in, I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit. I started a LinkedIn show called OK Boomer Live, OK Boomer Live TV. And I just thought it was a great, catchy phrase because I love lapel pins and, kind of an old school boomer type working in a millennial and Gen X world. So you're watching OK Boomer Live, and the topic today is Amazon from A to Z. Will they have a Transpacific vessel string? So let's get into the heart of the presentation so I can keep you guys on schedule, because I know you've had a busy recovery period back to your offices. So I think the first thing that we want to talk a little bit about is what might this look like? And I think the first thing you have to look at is I took apart 2 and 3 day chunks of volume, June 22nd to June 23rd, May 5th to May 7th. And I found that between Amazon.com, Amazon Logistics, there's enough volume to support what I would call a fast ship. Now, I like the strategy of having Amazon potentially move into a Matson-esque type service, 12 to 14 day type service from Ningbo or Shanghai, maybe change up the rotation a little bit with Yantian or South China ports, along the way. But if you look at it, one of the things that caught my eye in terms of putting together the segment is the Matson ships typically are 2 to 3,000 or 2 to 4,000 TEUs. And they're pretty sleek ships, and they always demand a price premium. And if you look at Amazon's portfolio out of, there's a lot out of Yantian, so let's skip Yantian for a second. But if you look at Amazon's vessel portfolio out of, say, Shanghai, and I just monitored a whole bunch of different sample shipments today, they're dealing with 20, 21 days to the West Coast, and the opportunity here to do it in 12 to 14 days is strategic in a couple ways. One is that you can pull cargo from week to week and still basically achieve a 12 to 24 day transit time if you have your warehousing and your supply chain properly weaponized. You don't always need the fastest ship. So the idea is, and I know where some of the haters are going to come out and say, well, 4 vessels is not enough. Yeah, and I get it, that you're looking for a quick turn time, and those 4 vessels can only do about 10 round trip turns a year. But there's always fluff in it, right, to increase the yields and the bandwidth of adding vessels in or changing the vessel configuration size. So the way I look at it, if Amazon would get into this business, they would need 4 vessels in the Matson range, 2 to 3,000, and 12 to 14 day type transits from China to the West Coast. And it need not call or feed any other ports. I think that Amazon's cargo is more than sufficient to cover these origin points. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is that the charter rates, right? Do you buy these new, or you buy them on the charter rate, or you lease them, right? And I think initially my first thought was, okay, well, it's $100 million for one of these, and they need 4 or 5 of them, so that's $500 million. They just paid $500 million in COVID bonuses to their delivery drivers and warehouse staff. So, $500 mil is a drop in the bucket to Amazon. But I'm going to go on the assumption that we charter these in the charter market. And again, charter rates might range from, $10,000 to $12,000 a day for these kind of ships. I factored in 20,000 because I wanted my assumptions to be on the higher end, and not like, just like, well, you can't get it for that kind of rate. And so some of my assumptions that you may think are lacking are, well, have I taken into consideration landside and ancillary costs? And I have kind of factored that all in my formula. I've put in a very generous $700 a box fuel surcharge when I factor in my expenses, as you'll see as I go through the presentation. So I think you have to just trust me that basically it's about $1,000 expense, to handle a container, right, in this ecosystem. One of the things that you have to also consider is Amazon, and a lot of people don't know this, they have their own 53-foot intermodal containers. Not that they would necessarily deploy them in this trade, but you're probably thinking about, well, what about leased containers? Well, they have hundreds and hundreds of these 53-foot that are versatile enough to go on the ship and on the train. But again, nothing always is nice and easily, fitting inside the 53. So, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that it's an important consideration. And of course, the Amazon 3PL or truck network system to move cargo inland. A lot of the assumptions are that Amazon's ecosystem is going to govern this process or practice. And it's funny you say that, right? Because practice makes perfect. I think that one of the reasons why Amazon is prime for a vessel string is that this is not their first rodeo, right? The way they set this up with Dwell and subsequently their own people minimally in China. They went from basically, a couple containers to Katie bar the door. I saw basically thousands of containers pour in. So they've got a really good run organic system for their fulfillment by Amazon side. And if anything, what you'll see in this particular model is this model will allow them to grab more of that FBA cargo at the same time reduce their direct buys in Asia. In other words, instead of buying something from Intex or Westinghouse or Zenith, Amazon sells the services to these vendors, and for a slotting fee, and it's another way for Amazon to make more money on the ship. But we'll get into that in the next slide. So you see the way I did that, amazing options, right? So this just gives the audience a purview or a preview of the types of vessel classes available. And I think what we want to kind of focus on is, the Panamax type options, where there's 3,000 to 5,000 TEUs. And it kind of gives you, at least in my idea, the range of ship that they might shoot for should they introduce a Transpacific string. Now, again, it doesn't say that after a while they can throw in a post-Panamax string, which is 5,000 to 10,000 TEUs. I think that with the advent of digital offerings like Maersk Spot and MSC's offering and NYSHEX, you're going to have a lot of opportunity where Amazon can fill in the cream of not only their own cargo and the NVO cargo that they already carry, but also corollary opportunities for maximizing revenue. And we'll get into that in a second here. So I think that this next slide gives a rough representation of where they are at now. If you were to profile 2,400 TEUs on a vessel, this is 740s of their own cargo and 500 of their logistics division cargo. So they have probably, I don't have Amazon as a client yet, hint, hint. But I figured that, let's say their expense or their blended average on ocean shipping is, let's just call it right now in real 2020 dollars, $1,700 a slot, a container. This is what they pay currently to the VOCC carriers or NVOs. So they pay on average for this particular, let's call this theoretical vessel, this theoretical voyage, about $1.2 million in sea freight. But on the other hand, based on looking at their NVO tariff and knowledge of the margins, they could be marginalizing up to $1,000 file profit per container on the NVO side. And that includes all the fulfillment services that they're offering the Chinese vendors on the front end and on the USA end. So that's a run rate of about $500,000. So net expense, $700,000 a vessel. Times, let's say, hypothetical 40 sailings, if this was on their own vessel, and they'd have, or if this is a theoretical slice before we put them on their own vessel. Excuse me, I think you follow where I'm going with this. So this is Amazon now before they have any vessels or before they charter a vessel. So if you look at what they're paying out on ocean freight and what they're taking in, they have about a $27 million expense hit on ocean freight. Now, if you look at the potential on charter, and this is what I really like, this slide is probably my favorite of all. So notice how they've gone from 700 containers under the current profile to 600 containers here. And I'm going to explain why that goes down 100 as we go through this description here. So I look at this as a great service to market to the FBA clients, right? So it's turnkey, they're getting faster transit times, it's more buzz, they've got their own vessel. It just ups the ante in terms of taking and co-opting the market from China to the US. So they go up maybe 200 containers on the Amazon logistics cargo. Now, if they have their own vessel, right, and they control their own destiny, and they control the port services and the intermodal, what's to say that they can't go after the premium protective cargo, the high volume, high value, not high volume, high value, high end garments, right? That need an ocean service and then a team truck, right? So a $10,000 service from Shanghai to New York. But what if they're marginalizing that at $8,000 profit and they only have 50 loads under that service? So there's a real incremental run rate in terms of how they can potentially allocate that vessel. Slotting fees on BCOs, that's where the hundred's coming from. So in other words, my idea here is Amazon buys thousands of containers from people like Intex and Westinghouse and Zenith and Bowflex, right? Where those companies control their ocean freight and deliver to Amazon. But what if Amazon now delivers ocean services to those vendors, and those vendors also get preferential slotting fee on the Amazon site? Just think of it, right? Zenus, it's one of the biggest selling products is Zenus bed frames and mattresses, right? And all of a sudden, Zenus is an ocean customer of Amazon, and Amazon is also giving them some leverage in terms of how they position that product on the website. So it's a really, really clever, I think, opportunity for Amazon to convert customers that are controlling their own terms of sale and migrating the terms of sale a bit to Amazon's favor to pick up incremental ocean revenue, and at the same time, work with their trusted partners such as Westinghouse or Bowflex or Husqvarna to give a slotting fee where there's a better position. Very similar to when you go into Safeway or Albertsons, and Procter and Gamble competes for shelf space, at the eye level, and the generic brands are at the or the lower level brands are at the bottom shelf. Now, the other thing too that I came into play on the scenario is, if it's coming right, it only makes sense, right? The ship's coming from Asia. What's going to happen when it goes back? Well, there is a westbound movement, but I mean, if you only have 500 containers and you're filling the rest with empties, there's another way to marginalize some westbound cargo so that you're not riding dead back to Asia. So it gives some incremental revenue to the ship that it normally wouldn't carry. So always looking for profits, right, to turn it. So this is a 30-day, 38-day running cycle where these costs are coming into play, and I thought that when I looked at it holistically, it changes from a loss of 27 million to a profit of 55 million under the model that I've suggested that might be feasible here. So it's really a unique way for Amazon to kind of control their own destiny and to do some really sharp and interesting things marketing-wise in the sea freight space that they haven't thought about. And again, they don't really need the salespeople to do it. A lot of this can be done with digital tools and through some of the other options that I mentioned. And this is a good example of those slotting arrangements that I talked about. These are major customers on Amazon that also have their own ocean programs like Zenus and Intex, Westinghouse, Husqvarna, Bowflex, and there you see the D-Well partnership, which kind of started the whole thing off. And I think that one of the options that Amazon would have available to them, if they're running out of space, or I'm sorry, if they're short on filling space, is, one hand serves the other, right? So what's to say that there's not co-loading opportunities, or there's some NVOCC, NSA sharing arrangements between the new Amazon vessel operating program and a D-Well, just like there would be with Amazon selling directly to a BCO like PVH or Tommy Hilfiger and any of these fine companies. So I think there's some interesting side opportunities for the program to have a paradigm shift, and that's where the slide comes in, where by looking at a terms of sale remix, it's going to create this incremental profit for Amazon, but it's also going to help serve the manufacturers that Amazon potentially is soliciting ocean freight cargo to, because they're going to have better slotting arrangements on the website, on the selling site itself. And obviously more selling means more containers, and it's self-perpetuating motion. So I thought that the ability for Amazon to do this was really a dramatic shift in a paradigm. And I think that given the state of the Transpacific market right now and how challenging it is and how rates are at an all-time high, it wouldn't be unsurprising that this is not being talked about in the war rooms at Amazon as we speak and going forward. Certainly if there's one company that can pull it off, we all know, it would be Amazon. And it's not that challenging, really, if you think about it. The metrics are there, the numbers are there. they were already proven to be a fine, quasi NVO operator. And with the partnerships that they've had, they have enough training and opportunity to go out into the marketplace and basically ensure that, like a hotel room that goes unsold for the night, you never want a slot on the vessel to go unsold. And I think that's one of the unique opportunities that an Amazon Ocean gives the beneficial cargo owner community. And I think it may actually be one of the tickets that BCOs need to help set a level playing field with carrier and vessel constraints that are happening not only now in the trade, perhaps even up to a year from now, we may still see a similar scenario. So an Amazon as a player really changes the dynamics of the Transpacific. It gives a premium cachet to the services that are out there in the marketplace. And certainly if you look at very high value FOB cargo, it may even give Amazon a chance to get into project cargo and other cargoes that they never contemplated, opening up new opportunities in manufacturing and verticals that up until now were basically blocked from their cachet, from their entry. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of how I potentially see Amazon getting involved, where some of the opportunities they might immediately go after, and some of the long-term considerations that obviously still have to be put into play, such as, what ports would they call? Would they go to a port? Would they use a fully geared vessel, where they can lift their own containers off? What type of union or other issues might they run into? So again, I realize and I acknowledge there are a whole host of unanswered questions, but the main question is that it shouldn't be unachievable, that Amazon could not pull this off. The practice that they had on the NVO, that was not done for nothing, for anything. And now that they've expanded and blossomed with their partnership with Hackney, the Amazon fulfillment operation is really, really slick. And I don't think other than Hackney, I don't know, some other people viewing here might have been aware of this, but I think this is the first time I'm breaking this information that their FBA program has expanded so dramatically. So much so that I think I would want to rework my numbers to a different size container ship. But I think for the sake of argument, they would give a good ride to the service. I think they would be somewhat neutral, I think, which might surprise somebody. I don't think they would ever co-load with Walmart, but it's not unforeseen that somebody like PVH or Nordstrom's or somebody else is riding out there in the open that has a store on Amazon. Why not, right? That's a natural fit. Patagonia, I'm just making names up off the top of my head now, VF Outdoors, Eddie Bauer. There's so many possibilities where, these major BCOs, could start contributing to marginal revenue on Amazon's vessels. So, again, you've been watching OK Boomer Live. I'm Steve Ferrari, your host. I'm CEO of Ocean Audit. Feel free to agree, disagree in your comments after you have a chance to digest some of the scope of this video. I'm sure I'll be hearing a lot from everyone in terms of why it's either a good or not a good idea. But thank you again for your time, and I've just about exhausted my 30 minutes that I promised I'd take from your day. And thank you again. It's a pleasure and an honor to be a broadcaster here on LinkedIn. Steve Ferrari signing off. Good day.